this is going to be more around the ACC, but man, conference realignment news affects everybody. Big 12, SEC, ACC, whatever conference you're in these days. Conference realignment news is going to affect everybody. And we actually got some, I think, big realignment news hidden, tucked away in one of the hires of this college football coaching cycle. It's crazy, but I had not even considered this. And the more I started to read about this and think about it, I was like, damn, maybe I was wrong about this hire, because I definitely panned the hire and was sort of like, hey, bring it on. I'm here for the content, but I don't think this is going to be great. I may be retracting that a little bit here. So Bill Belichick gets hired at North Carolina, right? My initial gut reaction was like, one, you just ran off a guy for being too old, right? Bill Belichick is like 6 months younger than Mac Brown. Why you got to do Mac Brown like that? A guy who I really like, by the way. And like Bill Belichick dealing with college athletes, I don't know. That just he doesn't seem to fit the game. But you start thinking about it, it's like, well, these guys are now basically pros with the money they're getting paid. You're not going to have to do the same traditional type of recruiting you used to. Like, okay. So I'm coming around to it a little bit more. I still, I don't know. It's like things passed Belichick by a little bit. I was listening to Seth Wickersham the other day talk about how Belichick, on a podcast all season was pointing out mistakes NFL coaches were making and that he hasn't lost. Okay. A little hard for me to believe, but I can get behind it. But the biggest thing is just the commitment that North Carolina is making to football right now and why that they're showing with hiring Bill Belichick. I should add the other thing about North Carolina that had me kind of panning this was, well, too many cooks in the kitchen. That's very obvious. They're infamous for that, and having donors have way too much pull there. I mean, they're very similar to Texas, a la, like, guess why Mac Brown was coaching at both places. He's the perfect type of guy to deal with stuff like that. But I thought this article from WRAL was really, really interesting. So here's a quote that they attribute to Jennifer Lloyd, who's a member of the UNC Board of Trustees. We are absolutely 100% committed to football and committed to winning in football. We want to win a national championship in football. North Carolina hasn't won a conference championship in football in like 4 decades. Here's a quote from Bubba Cunningham, the athletic director. Quote, "It's a risk. We're taking a risk that we're investing more in football with the hope and ambition that the return is going to significantly outweigh the investment." Yeah, I mean, look, it's a risk when you pay any coach the amount of money that they're paying Belichick. They're basically on the hook for like a guaranteed $30 million there. It's a 5-year deal worth $50 million, but only the first 3 are guaranteed. They are committing $16 million for assistant coaches, just an entire support staff. Included in that, a general manager. And then they're committing $13 million in revenue sharing to the football program. $13 million in revenue sharing for the football program, which I would imagine is going to be like fairly standard. And honestly, North Carolina might be a place where they get stuck pumping a little bit more of the rev share into men's basketball than you would at other places. But all of that is certainly signaling a major commitment from North Carolina to football, which has not traditionally been there for the Tar Heels. And then this is the really interesting part of this article that I'm reading. Unspoken in that is the Tar Heels conference affiliation. UNC is a charter member of the ACC. The North Carolina headquartered league was long at or near the top of the athletic hierarchy in college athletics. But football's ascendancy and basketball's decline in overall importance, an ill-timed long-term TV deal combined with consolidation of major brands into other leagues, have left the conference far behind its peers in revenue generation and distribution. They're starting to position this, right? You can feel where this is going. Unspoken in that commitment, the financial commitment the Tar Heels are making is their conference affiliation. Quote, "If we don't get into that game, we're going to get left behind. It was now or never," said UNC trustee Dave Bullock, former chairman of the board. That's what this amounts to. Now or never. To have someone like Coach Belichick come in and try to change the trajectory and do something different. Bullock, this is according to the author, Bullock wants UNC in another league, preferably the SEC. One hope, Belichick in an in-demand football program can close the financial gap in the short term while positioning the Tar Heels to a conference jump in the medium term. So, there was all this ACC kind of kumbaya there for a little while when, admittedly, it did look like for the ACC things had turned around at least a bit. They had much more of a fighting chance to try and keep all of this together. But you're seeing things signaled here from North Carolina. North Carolina's not sitting there like, well, we'll go hire John Sumrall, who, I think could have done a really good job. And like, hey, we'll kind of still be a second-ish tier college football program in terms of attention. Maybe we can go out and win 9 or 10 games with this guy. He'll be a good, solid ball coach. And you guys know I love using this line. Most places, I am all about get the ball coach, not the crazy, shiny name. Don't do the Les Miles, Charlie Weiss, Kansas hire thing. Get a ball coach. But here I can actually understand this. Like, take your swing for the fences because you need to generate more attention and just signal that you're serious about this because you've got to signal to the SEC, Big Ten, whoever, like, hey, we can hang, we can do this. We need to be doing everything we can to just position ourselves to be ready when the opportunity comes to actually jump to a major conference. I shouldn't phrase it like that. A Power 2 conference. Jump to one of the big two. And that's what North Carolina is showing here. Like they're serious about this. And it shows you that whether it was all David Bullock or whoever that are the donors behind the scenes on this, it shows you that faction seems to be winning out here. Remember, we talked to Andrew Carter on the channel back in the offseason, who does a great job covering all things North Carolina and in the triad and all that. And he kind of said, like, yeah, there's a faction that wants the Big Ten. There's a faction that wants the SEC. There's a faction that wants them to stay in the ACC. A lot of cooks in the kitchen, remember. A lot of cooks in the kitchen. It appears that those who really are pushing for, hey, the long-term play here is not to be traditionalists and stick around in the ACC. I know all that tradition and stuff is nice, but man, we got to be ready for the future. And that's what they're doing. And a lot of that is, and the article makes this point, it is tied to the basketball identity as well, because like you don't want to get left behind and leave your other sports in the lurch. You gotta do whatever you can to get as much money generating to your athletic programs to be able to fund them the best that you can and give them the most attention on a national level that you properly can. And football has to be the driver on that. There's really nothing else to it. And it seems like North Carolina has that. And so that is a big part of why I'm kind of amending my take on Belichick, because it's like, if it's a more broad-based hire than where I was saying, typical cliche school that thinks it's more important than it is, tries to go out and just hire the big, thunderous, important name, as opposed to just hiring the solid coach. And this is another old guy. And like, what are they doing? Well, what they're doing is showing that they'll swing for the fences and do everything they can to try and make football as good as it can possibly be, because they understand the gravity of the moment here, that you need to be ready to compete in one of the big two conferences whenever that day comes calling. So that is where this is at. I thought the article did a great job of outlining all that. And I've got to say, it's pretty fascinating how realignment is just driving like literally every single decision that everybody is making in college athletics these days, for better or worse. I think we can all agree, generally probably worse. But here we are. So I appreciate that article.